Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds, and I'm here with Keith, co-star of my upcoming film, If, only in theaters May 17th. Do you want to tell people the big news? All right, I'll do it. Sign up now and you'll get unlimited for $15 a month and 6 months of Paramount Plus Essential Plan on us. MintMobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 equivalent to $15 per month. Unlimited over 40 gigabytes per month. Face lower speeds. Videos at 480p. Active Mint customers by 531.24 get 6 months of Paramount Plus Essential Plan. Auto renews after 6 months. Offer ends May 31st, 2024. Separate Paramount Plus registration required. Terms and conditions apply if rated PG.
Mom deserves the best, and there's no better place to shop for Mother's Day than Whole Foods Market. They're your destination for unbeatable savings. From premium gifts to show-stopping flowers and irresistible desserts. Start by saving 33% with Prime on all body care and candles. Then get a 15-stem bunch of tulips for just $9.99 each with Prime. Round out Mom's menu with festive rosé, irresistible berry chantilly cake, and more special treats. Come celebrate Mother's Day at Whole Foods Market.
This episode is brought to you by La Quinta by Wyndham. Your work can take you all over the place, like Texas. You've never been, but it's going to be great because you're staying at La Quinta by Wyndham. Their free Bright Side breakfast will give you energy for the day ahead. And after, you can unwind using their free high-speed Wi-Fi. Tonight, La Quinta. Tomorrow, you shine. Book your stay today at lq.com.
Hello and welcome along to the Paddock and the Pavilion, possibly the only podcast which features cricket and horse racing, with me, your host, Stephen Wallace. Joining us today is Rosa Simkin of Rosa Talks Ball, a previous guest on the show and a passionate supporter of women's sport. Rosa looks ahead to the major events in the women's 2024 cricket calendar and gives her predictions of the likely trophy winners. A rising star of the future, Rosa adds her perceptive thoughts on Project Darwin, which is set to change the women's cricketing landscape in 2025. But let's get started and find out how Rosa began her love of women's sport. Hello, Rosa of Rosa Talks Ball.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Well, thanks for joining me. It's about time we had this chat. You've had, I've written this down, a couple of cameo appearances when you featured on a podcast about the 100 and also about the Women's Ashes. And we'll come on to your predictions. We won't mention the Welsh Fire. Oh, I did. When we get to the talk about the 100. But in this podcast, I'm going to find more about you, Rosa, your love of women's sport, a look ahead to the 2024 season, although it's just started, your thoughts on the 2025 women's setup, and also, you've guessed it, ask for your predictions for 2024. So lots to talk about. But to start with, briefly, have you seen any cricket so far this season?
I have, yes. I've been to a couple of games. I went to, I can't remember which day, but one of the days of the Men's County Championship game, Warwickshire versus Durham at Edgbaston, which was good. And then last weekend, I was at Central Sparks versus the Blaze for the opener of the women's cricket season. First time using my media pass, so it was a great day out.
Yeah, congratulations on your media pass.
Thank you very much. It was definitely a bit of a shock, but it's a privilege, and I'll look forward to covering even more games than would have been possible without it this year.
Well, good luck to that. But let's begin with your own story. How did you first get interested in sport?
Sport, in terms of as a whole, it was all due to my older sister. They dragged me down to Edgbaston when I was 9 for my first Warwickshire game. They'd been in love with cricket for much longer than that, but finally managed to persuade my parents to let them drag me down. I mean, I was very small, still am. So me alone in a train station with my old sister probably terrified my parents. But when they finally let me, I had a great time. It was a T20 game. I have no idea who Warwickshire were playing. I have no idea what happened. I probably didn't know what was going on, but I loved it so much. So my sister kept dragging me back and then got me membership. Women's sport, I went to my first Central Sparks game in 2021, and it was versus Western Storm at Edgbaston, and it was an absolutely boiling day. It was one of the hottest days of the year, and the only stand they'd opened was the Holly stand, so we were directly in the sun all day. But I watched Amy Jones hit 163 not out from 114 balls in that game, and I think from that point, you just weren't going to get me away from sport.
Now, we're going to concentrate on cricket, but you also follow other sports as well, don't you?
I do. I follow lots of sports. I'm quite diverse in what I'm willing to watch, less so participate. But watching, I'll watch pretty much anything. I think my other main one is football. I'm an Arsenal women's fan, so I watch a lot of their games, travel a lot to see them. So, yeah, just sport as a whole. It's great. I love it.
But you also play cricket, don't you?
I do, yeah. Mainly, I played a little bit before this point, but at the end of 2022, at the winter, that's when I properly committed to cricket. And unfortunately, I missed last year due to injury, but I'm really looking forward to get going this year with a new club, with multiple teams as well, because I'm involved in some charity stuff, but it's looking to be a really good season. I'm now a leg spinner since the winter, which was not expected. I was a pace bowler. And then in November, I decided, you know what, I'm going to give spin a go. So we've been working hard on the leg spin, which will debut on grass in a few weeks. So that'll be interesting. But I'm really looking forward to the season.
Bit of a difference from pace bowling to spin bowling.
Yeah, massively. I think the main thing for me was the issue with my knees. Like the pressure which you put on your knees pace bowling is rather significant. So when I was coming back from my injury, I ended up bowling from a very short run up. So I was playing around more with the lengths and lines and like types of deliveries. So, and that was then that I realised I could probably bowl spin. So I said to my coach, kind of tongue in cheek, do you think I should give spin a go? And he looked at me like I was nuts, but we're now a few months later and it's my go-to in the nets. So that's a positive.
We ought to give a shout out to the team or club you play for.
Berkswell, in Coventry, definitely need to give them a shout out. Great group of girls, thriving women set up. Probably genuinely one of the best in the Midlands. They've got their women's first 11 won the league last year. They've got second 11. They've got developmental 11. They've got junior set up, which is very rare for women's cricket around here. So definitely worth giving them a shout out.
Well, women's sport is very much growing. And I've got a question. It often comes up, but do you think the Euros win in 2022 was a spur to all women's sport?
I mean, the Lionesses lifting that trophy was pivotal for the image of women's sport, and I think that's where the growth has come from. I think the lack of media presence for women's sport before that point was very noticeable, and it has now improved across the board. I mean, all of the Women's Six Nation games were covered this year and were on TV, as an example. And I think that win and the crowds which that tournament attracted kind of made everyone turn around and go, oh, women's sport is good. It may not be the same as the men's game, it doesn't mirror it, but it's just as good and it's just as entertaining. And that image and that fan base has kind of trickled down elsewhere, especially in cricket and the 100.
And the Euros obviously being in England that year.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's very different when a team wins overseas, and you saw it a bit with Spain winning the World Cup last year, which was in Australia and New Zealand. They didn't have the Euros effect, and the Euros effect was massive in England for all sports and everyone involved. It just hasn't happened in Spain. And whether that's cultural or whether that's because it wasn't on their home soil, we'll never know. But I reckon the fact that they lifted that trophy at Wembley in front of 88,000 or whatever people, that's just incredible.
Well, what also is incredible, we've got Rosa Talks Ball. How did that all start, and how did you come up with the name?
I mean, the name was probably the straightforward part. It was quite a sudden decision. Like a lot of things I do, it was created off of being angry at something. In this case, I was on my way to a double header at Edgbaston, a Central Sparks game following a Warwickshire game. And I was so frustrated at the lack of coverage which the women's players were receiving. from media and it being streamed on TV, and also from getting people into the stadium. So I started an Instagram account and just started posting blogs at Sparks games. And the name was kind of like, I was thinking, I'm mainly going to cover sports which involve a ball. I eventually want to start a podcast, so Rosa Talks Ball just makes sense.
And you've now got a Twitter page, you're now on YouTube, and you've got a website.
Yeah, it's definitely accelerated a bit, especially since mid-2023. I think it was, for me, time to step it up. I want to eventually go into a career of journalism. I'm trying to now cover more diverse sports. At the moment, obviously, attention is on cricket because we're in the cricket season. But I'm also looking to cover rugby and football on a very regular basis at both an international level and also a club / I guess it's rugby, it's club level. So yeah, we're now on pretty much all social medias, got a website, started the podcast, so we're definitely going up.
And how long's that taken you?
I mean, website was launched in August last year, and it was when that happened which I kind of started really pushing it. I had major exams last year, so I couldn't do anything before that point. It made things more complicated. So eventually getting to that point, it definitely made a huge difference. I think it's now just trying to grow what I've got and increase the amount of people it's reaching and the amount of people who are seeing these incredible athletes who are on offer.
And what does your family think to all of this?
They're very supportive. They can also see that there's very clearly a career coming, hopefully, for me. So from that point of view, the parents are definitely a lot more calm about it. It's definitely a bit of a jump from when I was younger and I was convinced I wanted to be an engineer. And then I realised that you needed to be able to do maths and science for that. So that dream died very quickly. My natural ability has always been with more of the humanity subjects and English. And they can also see that it's genuinely a passion through covering it and playing it. So they're very supportive of the whole thing.
Well, that was a good choice of a word there. I won't repeat it, but what 3 words do you think would sum up your love of women's sport?
Oh, that's a really good question. Permanent, because I can promise you it is not going to go anywhere. Genuine passion. I think women's sport means an awful lot to me and plays a huge role in my life. Oh, third one. Passion, permanent. Can I think of another P? Keep it rhyming. Probably not.
Well, we can come back to that. I'm sure you'll think of something during the podcast. But
I'm sure I will.
I wanted to move on now to the 2024 season, which has already started. We've had 3 games in the Rachel Hayhoe Flint Trophy. And you've done an excellent, 2 vodcasts, whatever you want to call it, on your YouTube about the season ahead. And I'd recommend that to anyone to listen to those 2 programs on the Rosa Talks Ball YouTube channel. But we've only had 3 matches, but what do you think so far of the tournament? Any people that have surprised you, teams that have surprised you?
It's been a bit nuts, to be honest. I think it's been the most dramatic start to a season we've had in a long time. The Blaze, who were favourites in this tournament, they made the final last year, have been absolutely steamrolled 3 games in a row by teams with the ball and are now bottom of the table with a negative 3 point something run rate and are probably completely out of it. I'd like to think not. I'd like to think they can get back into it. I think the Southeast Stars have really surprised me. They made the semi-finals last year, but they've always been a team who, despite the group of players they have been incredibly inconsistent and also kind of crumbled in those pressure moments. And I think there's a player within that setup who've really surprised me. Tash Farron, who is on an England Central contract, has had 2 stress fractures in a row and is coming back for the first time this season. Before the beginning of the season, she hadn't scored a half century in List A cricket for 12 years. In the opening 3 games, she's opened the batting for Stars and scored 50 plus in all of them. So she seems to have rebirthed as a batter, which is staggering. I don't think any women's cricket fans can claim they had that on their bingo cards, because nobody was predicting it. I think it's much more competitive this year. All of the games pretty much have been reasonably close, which is really good to see, because at the end of the day, if you want people to be watching women's cricket, you need there to be competition.
You mentioned the Blaze. Are they not missing a few players?
Yes, that's probably quite an important thing to mention. They're missing the Bryce sisters to Scotland, who are currently trying to qualify for the T20 World Cup in October. They're missing Georgie Boyce through injury. They've just got Lucy Hyan back, and they're also missing their England players. But as a general rule, women's regions should never rely on the England players because they're barely available. So they've had Sarah Glenn available for the season. They haven't had Natsira Brunt and Tammy Beaumont. But arguably a team at that level should be able to cope with the players they're missing to more of an extent than they have. So I hope that they go in a much more positive direction.
Well, there's lots of games to go in the Rachel Hayhoe Flint Trophy. Are there many overseas players this season to look out for?
Yes, there are. I think, I may be wrong on this, I think every team has an overseas player now. I think Amanda Jade Wellington at Western Storm was an absolute find for them. Incredible Aussie spinner who can also do a bit with the bat. They're a team who is very young. They have a really young squad, so that experience is very valuable for them. Katie Mack at Thunder scored a century on home debut. Another Aussie. That's rather a theme, I have to say. I think all of the overseas players this year are Aussies, apart from Nadine de Klerk, the South African at Blaze. So yeah, it's really good to see the game attracting so many overseas stars, and it's a really positive indicator as to how far women's regional cricket has come since 2020, because that just didn't happen. But there's definitely lots of people, lots of stars to look out for.
And are we seeing more games at the bigger grounds as well?
Yes, for sure. I think part of that is Project Darwin. I think heading into this season, the clubs who wanted to be involved with the women's setup next year knew they needed to step up their game. Edgbaston are hosting a lot more games this year. New Road were due to be, but obviously they've got the flooding issues. But as a whole, I think most of the games are occurring at major stadia, which is really important, because even if you're not filling it, it makes people aware that the games are happening if you've got them somewhere which are accessible. So yeah, definitely using more of the main stadia this year.
And is there some TV coverage of the games?
No. Unfortunately, this might change. I don't know if Sky have plans to show any of the finals. Sky didn't televise any women's regional cricket last year. The year before, they televised the Rachel Hayhoe final, but they did it rather poorly, so got a lot of criticism. So I think that's why they decided not to do it last year, which is a shame, because they do so much for the women's game, the WPL, the 100, England Women, that you'd like to see them, or Channel 4, or BT, TNT, just anyone willing to cover these games. But unfortunately, the ECB hasn't pushed for it, so it just hasn't happened.
Because that's been very useful for the Women's Super League for football, isn't it? TV coverage.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, every weekend there is a game televised on either the BBC or Sky. And they also do specific women's football weekends where Sky will show 3 or 4 fixtures, and it does huge things, because if people are seeing this representation on TV and able to watch these teams, they're going to then go to the stadiums. It's kind of this transferring effect. And we don't have that in women's regional cricket, and it's really problematic.
Well, we're going to come on to Project Darwin shortly, but hopefully when that sort of comes together in 2025, there will be more regional cricket, or county cricket as it will be then, on women's cricket on television. But one tournament that is on television is the 100. And again, that could be changed in 2025. But as for 2020, tour, are you expecting another exciting season?
I mean, the 100 is brilliant, and I know it's a very controversial talking point in the world of cricket. But for me, from a women's cricket perspective, it's been absolutely massive. I mean, you're getting thousands and thousands of people wanting to watch these players, and the action on the pitch really backs it up. Every game's exciting. You have high scoring thrillers and also really low scoring thrillers as well. There are a few games last season where the team batting first didn't even reach 100 runs from their 100 balls, and yet the other team still struggled to reach the total. I reckon we're in for another really exciting year of the 100. And whether it continues past this year or not, it's done incredible things for women's cricket, and I hope that's something which is thought about when they're considering the future of it.
I must admit, I love double headers, the fact that you can see two games on the same day. And in 2024, we've got lots of Australians.
Yes. I think the Aussie drama has been an ongoing thing in the 100, especially in the women's side of things. In the first year, they weren't available due to COVID, so it was mainly Indian players who came over. And a few players from smaller nations. But this year, Meg Lanning, as an example, absolute legend coming over. Elise Perry, I could go on. Ashley Gardner. It's incredible. And the fact that the tournament attracts the world's best kind of says all you need to know about it.
And we've got Marizanne Kapp coming back again for the Oval Invincibles.
She's a very special cricketer. There's not many in the game who can genuinely do both, as in bat and bowl equally. But she is someone who can have an economy of 2 in a T20 game, which she did recently, which is nuts, and then come out and hit 100. I mean, she won it 2 years in a row for the Oval Invincibles. So it's super exciting that she's coming back. It's really nice to see representation from countries which aren't Australia and New Zealand. So to have that South African representation is really important because they're really going up in women's cricket at the moment. So she's a super exciting addition.
Well, I'm sure it'll be another exciting year. We're going to find out later in the podcast whether you're going to predict Welsh Fire again. And they did do much better last year. So but let's move on to England. It's a women's T20 World Cup year in Bangladesh with 10 teams in the tournament. But before we talk about that tournament, what were your thoughts, or what are your thoughts on the England tour of New Zealand? They recently won their 4-1.
It was really promising. I think this England side has made significant progress over the past couple of years, but to see them able to perform without Nat Silverbrunt and Sophie Eccleston and all of those really big names is really important, because at the end of the day, those players aren't going to be around forever. And there's always a risk that no players like that get injured. And obviously, touch wood, I hope neither of those do, because they're crucial to the setup. But they can. And England, it's one of my concerns about the side. There's a couple of players that if they don't perform with the bat, they don't score any runs, and that's problematic. And you don't see it with the other nations. It was really good to see Amy Jones have a good series. She's really struggled to perform with the bat. I hope she can continue that, because obviously she's probably the best wicketkeeper in world cricket right now in the women's game. But her being able to bat as well is an incredible tool. I think my main concern is England's issues of playing spin and the World Cups in Bangladesh. And I think that could make or break their tournament.
Yeah, just keeping on the New Zealand theme, what was your take on the England opening situation? Because the series began with Tammy Beaumont opening with Sophia Dunkley, and it ended with Danny Wyatt. Admittedly, she was playing in the WPL, and Maya Bouchier being the two openers.
If I'm honest, and this is an extremely controversial opinion, I think that's the latter partnership of Wyatt and Bouchier is the direction England should go in. Tammy Beaumont is a phenomenal cricketer, do not get me wrong, but I don't think she's any better than the other T20 batters we have available to us. Obviously, she did amazing things in the 100 last year, But for me, I think focusing on the likes of Bouchier and Dunkley is more important. And yes, I'll be the first to admit that Dunkley is struggling right now for form rather significantly. She went off to the WPBL in Australia and was really unlucky with some of the deliveries which were bowled at her. But she had a lot of low scores and she came into the New Zealand series off the back of that. And the same thing occurred. So I think it's really important that England back her through that poor run of form, because we've seen what she can do, with bat. But I don't think she's an opener. I think she's a batter who should come in 5 or 6 for later on in the innings, because in the grander scheme of things, you're not going to get better than Wyatt and Bouchier, and that was proven during that series.
And this summer we're playing Pakistan and New Zealand at home.
Yes, we are. Super exciting. I think it's really important to keep the opposition fresh, because if you play the same people all the time, you're not going to get anywhere. I think it's interesting to play New Zealand in the winter for 3 ODIs and 5 T20s, then play them again for the same amount. But at the end of the day, I think this English summer, or I hope this English summer, will be John Lewis taking an opportunity to look at some different players, because I think that is something which England are missing. We rely on the same setup for too long. So those 2 series should provide really good opportunities against tough opposition. I mean, I've seen a lot of people undermining Pakistan and New Zealand's abilities. They're both 2 very talented teams with a few very talented players. Pakistan have just lost their former captain, which is a shame because she was unbelievable. But it looks to be a really exciting year and good prep for the World Cup.
Although it's totally different conditions in England to Sri Lanka, to Bangladesh.
Oh yeah, in more than one way. I think the heat in Bangladesh will prove a problem for the England players. Apart from anything else, I think the conditions of the wicket, I mean, I mentioned previously, they really struggle to play spin. And I genuinely cannot grasp why that is. I couldn't tell you, but it is something they struggle with. I think in the women's regional game in England, the spinners don't really turn the ball. And when you're then going into these climates where the ball turns a ridiculous amount, that's a big jump for the players. But hopefully, if they can build some form, I think we're also playing Ireland away just before the World Cup, then they can carry that form and then not have to focus on that and just focus on the conditions.
We did beat India 2-1 in that overseas T20 series, which gives us some hope. And of course, we beat Australia last summer 2-1 in the Ashes.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the Ashes stand out in that. And Australia are no longer invincible. And part of that, I think, is because they've lost Lanning. And that transition for them has been really difficult, and they lost a head coach to England men, ironically. But Lanning did a lot for that group. And I think she's been a huge loss. But also, I think everyone else has caught up. I mean, in 2020 in this country, we had, how many pros did we have? Not many. We had 5 a team. And then the England girls, and they had over 200. So obviously they were going to be the better team because they've got so many players who are not having to balance work with cricket. But now we've got past that point. We could genuinely compete with them this year. I think the India series was positive. The test match was concerning. That huge loss in the test match. But at the end of the day, you're not going to be in those conditions, hopefully, and those wicket conditions, hopefully, in a T20 World Cup. So you'd like to think that they can take those victories against 2 of the favourites as a way of thinking we can win this time.
All episodes of The Paddock and the Pavilion are now on YouTube, so why not subscribe to the show on that platform and keep up to date with all the latest horse racing and cricket podcasts. I hope you are enjoying Rosa's passion for the game of cricket. Coming soon, catch our discussion about Project Darwin and the shape of women's cricket in 2025. Well, you'd hope there'd be some good wickets in a T20 World Cup competition. Now, I'm going to. It's not a prediction, but I'm going to ask you a question now. So I've written down here Rosa's 11 for England's first T20 match in the World Cup.
Ooh, wow. Hang on, I'm going to write this down as I say it so I can actually, obviously, have a Knight has to be in there because captain.
Yeah.
You have to have Amy Jones as the wicket keeper. For your obvious ones, you need Eccleston. You need Sibber Brunt. Am I missing anyone really? You need Danny Wyatt.
We've got 5 so far.
I need to think about batters as well. Bouchier's in for me, and that might be controversial, but her form is unbelievable. Thinking about spinners, it's in Bangladesh. For me, you play Glenn and Dean. I don't see why not.
7, 8. Got 3 left.
How am I doing in the batting departments? I've got the opening partnership of Wyatt and Bouchier. Capsey. Dunkley I'm going to put in there, but not as an opener.
So is Capsey in as well?
Controversial, but no, I'm going to put Kemp in instead of Capsey.
I think you're 1 short now.
I am. I need one more. I need a pace bowler. I really need a pace bowler. I mean, in my dream world, it's Izzy Wong, but I don't see that happening. I think it's got to be Lauren Bell. So you've got opening partnership of Wyatt and Bouchier.
Yep.
Then I want Sibber Brunt in at 3, which rarely happens, but she's really good at it. I want Dunkley in at 4.
Yep.
Knight in at 5. Jones in at 6. Kemp in at 7. Eccleston in at 8. Glenn in at 9. Dean in at 10. And Bell in at 11. That's my 11.
So is Freya Kemp playing as a batsman?
Yeah, I think predominantly, and then she can do a bit of ball if you need her to. I mean, there's a few regional players who I would love to be in here and in the mix, but I just don't see them getting in to this group. Holly Armitage, as an example, she kind of made her debut in New Zealand. She came on as a substitute fielder. She's a very exciting batter, and I think she is a long-term replacement for Knight. But I don't think she'd make it above any of those players.
Right, so we've got your team. So
families have a lot going on. Let Ollie help manage the mental load with new cognitive help supplements for everyone 4 and up, like delicious Lolly Focus Pops or Lolly Mellow Pops for kids. And for parents, try 3 new Brainy Chews to help you focus, chill out, or get energized. Find these cognitive health buddies for the whole fam at ollie.com. That's OLLY.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
With threats to our nation waiting around every corner, adaptability is more important than ever. When conditions change without notice, quick strategic thinking is crucial. And with obstacles consistently impending, determination is essential in overcoming them. It's this willingness, decisiveness, and resilience that sets Marines apart. With our fighting spirit, we don't just fight battles, we win them. Marines are the constant our nation counts on to fight the unknown. And through adaptable problem solving, we do just that. Learn more at marines.com.
Many of us have those stubborn pounds that seem impossible to lose, no matter how good we eat or how hard we work out. My solution is PlushCare. PlushCare is a leading telehealth provider with doctors who are there for you day and night to partner with you in your weight loss journey. They can prescribe FDA-approved weight loss medications like Wegovy and Zepbound for those who qualify. Plus, they accept most insurance plans. To get started, visit plushcare.com/weightloss. That's plushcare.com/weightloss.
we're now going to move on to a subject that I've listened to about 3 or 4 different podcasts about. This is Project Darwin. And I know you were going to do your own deep dive. I don't know whether you finished doing your deep dive on the subject, but I'm going to ask you a few questions about it now. But firstly, before we talk about the Project Darwin and move into a county structure, are you sad to lose the Vipers, the Sunrisers, the Thunder, the Storm, the Southeast Stars?
I'm not sad to lose the Vipers. I'm sad to lose the rest of them. It's It's not disappointing, actually. That's not the right way of putting it. It's a bit sad. I think the regional structure, despite its flaws, has done a lot for women's cricket and the players within it. I mean, it's the first time we've ever seen a professional structure in this country, and it's worked to a certain extent. I think it's the right time to step away, but I'll miss seeing the teams in their current forms for sure.
So just for listeners, and I know you're going to correct me if I've made a mistake here, but there's going to be 8 Tier 1 counties starting in 2025, in no particular order: Durham, Surrey, Somerset, Essex, Nottinghamshire, Hampshire, Lancashire and Warwickshire, and then Yorkshire and Glamorgan are joining in 2027, and 2 unknown counties are joining in 2029 with no promotion and relegation. Is that correct?
It's perfect, yeah.
So what do you think to the changes, and what do you think to the counties that have been selected on the bidding process?
I think the counties who have got it for next year are the counties who should have got it for next year. And that is slightly controversial regarding Yorkshire and Durham. I think Durham had a better bid. And at the end of the day, that's what it goes down to. I think it's disappointing for those Diamonds players because they do everything at Yorkshire currently. But for me, I don't agree with the fact that they've already decided the next 2. I think what they should have done is they should have seen how the counties who missed out responded to missing out and then worked it out off the back of that. I mean, Glamorgan were always going to be one of them because of location, but leave the other spot up for grabs and let those other teams fight for it, because they really put their all into these bids. I mean, Warwickshire, as an example, are going under the new tagline, 1 Bears, 2 teams. So they're really taking on the women's team. But in the grander scheme of things, it's the right way to go for women's cricket in this country.
So you agree that it needed to go to a county structure for more sort of connection with an area?
I think for a lot of reasons. I think, first of all, it's too much on the ECB at the moment. They are pretty much fully funding women's regional cricket. They're currently putting in 250 grand into each of the women's regions each year to help them run. I think it might be more than that actually now. It is more than that. So I think it's important from a finance point of view that the counties kind of take responsibility a bit more. I think the connection point of view is crucial because, I mean, the players say it all the time. It's so hard to explain the regional structure to people who don't understand it. Like Central Sparks, how are you meant to tell who is underneath them? How are you meant to tell that they're Worcestershire and Warwickshire? There's no way of knowing just because they're central. Other teams like Thunder, it's more obvious, but that's quite rare. And I mean, Alex Hartley was on commentary for the Thunder game the other day, and she just said, whenever anyone asked me what team I played for, I'd say Lancashire because it was easier. And that kind of says all you need to know.
And the Thunder have played more games at Old Trafford, which then means a lot greater connection with Lancashire.
Yeah, I think Thunder have been a little bit cheeky. And the ECB would probably agree in the fact that they are basically Lancashire. They managed to sneak Lancashire onto their logo this year, and no one noticed. They changed their social media handles to Lancashire Thunder before the start of the season, and it wasn't picked up on. So there's definitely a connection with that team for Lancashire, and they also, the players who are on pay-to-play contracts, which means they just get paid when they represent the team, they get paid a living wage when they train. As an example, which is a step none of the other teams are taking, which is funded fully by Lancashire. Lancashire have found sponsors to fund additional contracts and additional roles for the women's team. They take them on tour to the same place the men. They very much already got the one team mentality, and it does work. It's just about now really pushing and advertising them so you get those crowds in.
And are you confident that this new structure will improve women's cricket and help the England team?
Yes, I am. I think the England team is already in a pretty good position. I think my main issue with that squad is it isn't particularly young. Don't get me wrong, there's a few very young players, but there's a lot of players in that setup who will retire in the next few years because that Sarah Brunt is 32, she can't go on forever, you know? And as much as everyone would love her to, because she seems to get better every year, at some point she's going to want to kick back and spend time with her partner, you know? So I think it will do wonders for the game. I do have a few concerns about it. What happens to the current players out those counties? I mean, the players who currently play for Durham, because county cricket in the women's game does exist. It's just amateur. And it's not at a professional level. So Warwickshire currently have a women's team, Worcestershire have a women's team, all of the counties have a women's team, but they use it as a transition team. But what happens to the captain of Durham who doesn't currently play for Diamonds, who are going to Durham? You know, what happens to those Warwickshire players who are currently playing in that women's team who aren't going to get in over the Central Sparks players? And then also, I think broken promises. I think the issue with relying on the counties is you're relying on them to put in the amount of money they've said they would. And that won't necessarily happen. And I cannot see the ECB turning around and taking the pro setup off teams because it does too much for the players. It, messes with their lives too much. But if they're going to make this work, it's really important that A, they stick with it, and B, they really tightly regulate what these counties are spending and what they're doing, because without it, it will just fail again.
And in 2029, there's going to be another 2 teams. We don't know who those teams are. Is 12 teams too many?
I think it's too soon, and some will agree, some will disagree. But I can see there being a talent pool for 10 teams in 2 years' time. I cannot see there being a talent pool for 12 teams. I also think they should focus on making every setup fully professional before they introduce 12. That's really important. Because at the end of the day, if the quality of cricket isn't as good, it brings the competition down. And when the players who are set at Warwickshire and set at Lancashire, and Nottingham are not going to then move to other teams unless you really entice them, and those teams don't have the money to really entice them. So it's kind of a bit of a slippery slope. Eventually, obviously, the dream is to have the same amount as counties in the men's game. But for me, 10 is enough at the moment at a push, and they should wait to see how those 10 do before they then commit to adding more. But what can you do?
I suppose there's plenty of time to actually, however much it's in stone. 2029 is a long way off. You could always delay that further. What would be interesting to see is when you've had a competition with 8 teams, how the 2 new teams get on, because they could be at a big disadvantage when they first go into that competition.
Oh, 100%. And that's why the not having relegation and promotion thing is so important. And there was a lot of questioning over that. And first of all, you can't have relegation and promotion if the tier 2 teams aren't professional, because that's a slippery slope. But also, those 2 teams are going to be at a disadvantage, and that's just the fact, because the other teams will have had 2 years to settle into their new environments, get a load of pro players, attract probably the best overseas players at that point. And the new team's just not going to be able to do that, and probably, you'd like to think they will, but probably won't go as far as the more cemented setups.
But broadly, you're in favour of what's happened and what's going to happen in 2025?
Yeah, for sure. I think it was needed. I think it's raised a lot of question marks as to why they didn't do it in 2020, to which I will say they couldn't. There wasn't the crowds, there wasn't the funding, there wasn't the interest from the counties. But since the hundreds happened and Lionesses won the Euros, teams know they need to invest in women's cricket and women's sport in general. So doing this now is the right thing. They just need to be really careful with how it's done, because they can't change their minds again. Because the stability thing is so important for growth. And if they don't regulate these counties and make sure they're doing what they claimed, it has the potential to go wrong. And the ECB don't want that. The players don't want that. The fans don't want that. So as a whole, I'm in favour, but I'm a little bit wary as to how it's going to be run and regulated.
I think you're right. 3 changes, I think, in 8 years. And I don't think you could have done it earlier because there wasn't the buy-in from the counties until you had the boost of the 100 with the crowds and the interest to actually want them to get involved themselves.
Yeah, I mean, the 100, as I said, has done absolutely huge things for women's cricket, and it's kind of made everyone go, we should invest in these players. And annoyingly, it should have happened before that, but it didn't because no one was pushing for it. And it's really good to see the ECB now want to grow the women's game. But in short, I think they're doing it a bit too late. And I think that there's been a lack of push as a whole. I mean, in 2020, they kind of just threw a load of money at these regional structures and left it up to them. And it just caused absolute carnage because there was no guidance in terms of salaries. There were players who were earning ridiculous amounts, then players who were still having to work second jobs alongside their salaries because they were only on 10k for a year, you know. But it's going in the right direction. It's about just continuing to push it that way.
Well, thanks for that. I enjoyed that. Now it's time for your predictions. So I'd like you to give me your winner of the Rachel Hayhoe Flint Trophy.
Anyone who follows my writing will know that I am absolutely awful at predictions, but it would be rude not to. I always give it a go.
Well, you've had 3 games start, so it's not like we're starting from scratch, is it? No.
It's true. I actually backed them before the season started.
So it's not the Blaze then, is it? No.
No. My God, that would not be a good starting point, would it? South East Stars, I had them down before the tournament started. They're currently top of the table. 3 wins from 3. They've beaten both of last year's finalists. Who else have they beaten? Central Sparks. They have so much potential. They're really gelling, and that's what they've been missing. They've got an incredible group of players. They've got Bryony Smith, they've got Tash Farron, they've got Alice Davison Richards, you know, Brianna McDonald-Gay. It's an incredible group of players, and I think they're finally motoring. So I'm going to back them and say they're going to go all the way.
Well, I'm glad you said that we've had 3 matches so far in the Rachel Hayhoe Flint Trophy, and that South East Stars had won all 3 of their matches. Because if you hadn't done, I would have snuck that one in. The Charlotte Edwards Cup, who's going to win that? You've got no help with that one. They've not played a game in that.
That's really difficult because I was going to say the Blaze, but given how they're performing in the 50 over stuff, I don't know if I want to put my name to them. Oh, look, I think Diamonds are up there. They've got a lot of young players who really fire in the T20 stuff. Lizzie Scott, as an example, an incredible pace bowler. I think Thunder as well. They're a little bit chaotic in the 50 over stuff, but they could gel in the T20 stuff. So I think it's going to be between those 2. As you can tell, I'm completely writing Vipers out of things because I want different teams to win things this year. I mean, Vipers have won everything apart from 1 Rachel Hayhoe Flint Trophy and 1 Charlotte Edwards Cup. So for me, it's very important that we get different names on these trophies for the last year.
So your Charlotte Edwards Cup winners are?
I'll go Diamonds rather than Thunder.
The 100. Last year won finally by the Southern Brave. Who are you going for? Not the Welsh Fire.
Fire again. Again. I was fuming last year because I made the prediction. Some people thought I was nuts because they'd come last every year and they came 3rd, and they were only knocked out because the semi-final didn't happen because of the weather. I genuinely believe they would have beaten Northern Superchargers in that game and then would have been more competitive in that final. So I'm backing them again. They've brought together the same group of players. They've got Tammy Beaumont, Hayley Matthews, Sophia Dunkley, you know, some huge names. They're going to do it. They're going to not have their eliminator rained off this year. And they're going to go all the way.
And they've still got Shabmin Ismail as well. So hopefully we might see another hat-trick from Shabnim in the for the Welsh Fire.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to be there last time. It was an unbelievable end result. Absolutely killed off the atmosphere at Edgbaston. So I feel sorry for the dads who had to play after it, because it looked certain that Phoenix were going to get that win. And then you've got the fastest bowler in women's cricket getting a hat-trick. I mean, you can't really argue with that, can you? So hopefully we'll see more of a magic this year.
And they've got some Aussies as well, like an Aussie.
Jess Jonathan, who I absolutely rate. She's currently being forced out of the national team setup, which is baffling because she's one of the best spinners out there. Didn't have the best Ashes series, people who are listening to this will know, but she is a very talented player and will add a lot of experience to that group.
Right, you've heard it again. So Rosa Simkin of Rosa Talks Ball is going for the Welsh Fire. What about the Women's T20 World Cup in Bangladesh? Let's have the 4 semi-finalists to start with.
England, Australia, South Africa, and I'm going to go a bit rogue. If they qualify, Sri Lanka. I'm not backing. I haven't backed India, have I? Apparently, I'm not backing India or New Zealand. There you go.
Of course, I won't use that clip anywhere. I'm sure Sri Lanka will qualify, but and what about the? So who's going to win it then? We've got the 4 semi-finalists.
I really want to say England, but I'm going to go rogue. And I'm going to back South Africa. They made the final last year and underperformed against a very strong Australian side. But they no longer have Lanning. And they're no longer in familiar conditions. So I think genuinely South Africa could go all the way. It's, I think, going to depend a lot. They've got a few injuries at the moment if they can get those players back. But I'm going to go rogue and I'm going to back South Africa to win it.
Right. Well, we won't mention those predictions again ever, I shouldn't think. But apart from on this podcast, I'll remember them when you're making another one of your cameo appearances on the show. My final question, it's not just cricket, actually. It's Rosa Talks Ball covers other sport and is very much into promoting women's sport, which you've got a great passion for, which we found out throughout this episode. And I wanted to ask you, where do you see women's sport in the next 5 years? This is always a typical question when you're in your staff interview, but this is not a staff interview. So where do you see women's sport in 5 years' time?
I see women's sport in 5 years' time on the same level of attendance and media-wise as the men's game. Mainly focusing in on, I think, the core, I'm going to put air quotes, the core sports of football, cricket and rugby, in terms of those are the ones which really get people in. Netball, to be fair, fastest growing sport in this country at the moment. But I see incredible things coming for women's sport. I think if the media backs these players and the teams give them the funding they need to thrive, there's no sign of anything slowing down, and it's super exciting to witness, and it's a privilege to be a part of and witness the growth. But hopefully I won't have to talk about the growth soon and we'll be at the peak.
Well, thank you very much for that answer. Thank you very much, Rosa, for joining us on the Paddock and the Pavilion, and keep up all your excellent work on Rosa Talks Ball on Twitter, Instagram, the website and YouTube. And I'll add those links to the podcast. And I'll look forward to a cameo appearance later in the year.
Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to speaking to you again very soon.
Sports Social Podcast Network. At Bet365, we don't do ordinary. We believe that every sport should be epic. Every home run, every hit, every inning, every play. From the moments that are legendary to the ones that fly under the radar. See for yourself when you sign up today and get $150 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. 21 plus only. Must be physically located in Virginia. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Terms and conditions apply.